Great performance, not the best result, right? That's
Wait,
that
wait,
that
wait, wait. Correct yourself. Great performance by both sets of teams, but not by the officials. Now that sounds better.
Yes, that was actually a great performance. Arsenal nil, Newcastle United nil. Newcastle came into the match pretty much looking for a draw, trying to hit Arsenal on the counter for the most match. This was such. I mean, we should have had like a couple of goals in the first 5 minutes. I thought, right? That was such a high intensity start to the game, and we really had Newcastle on the ropes pretty much for the entirety of the match. Now, so far we've been talking about Newcastle. We've been talking about Arsenal first and the opposition last. But I wanted to start with talking about this Newcastle team because I believe the way the record stands now, they've been unbeaten in the last 12 games in this season. And on current form, Newcastle have actually collected the most points in the last 10 matches in this season in the Premier League. So
Yep.
very well deserved third position for them and 9 points away from Arsenal and allowing City the opportunity to catch up now thanks to this draw. Do you actually see Newcastle finishing in top four?
If anything is to go by, and if they can produce similar results across and not have their bench stretched out, they might be able to do a job. And it's also partly due to the fact that Liverpool and Chelsea, and maybe to an extent Tottenham, are finding different ways of dropping points. So all the traditional big horses that you would want to be around the top four spots, making their own lives difficult, which might give Newcastle a pass at that, at the
Yeah,
top four spot.
I mean, they have definitely shown up to every game. I feel like, even against the top opposition, they've really shown up. They had that thrilling 3-3 draw against Manchester City earlier on in the season as well. And even in this match, I mean, you can say that Arsenal got unlucky, but Newcastle defended with their lives on the line, man. Pope had an incredible game. The entire defense had an incredible game. And what struck most was that Newcastle looked threatening every time they did come forward. I guess they were just not on song with their final delivery because that's when all their attacks petered out. But right up until that final pass, they seemed to have like really good build up. The players knew what they were trying to do. They had a game plan going into the match. And Eddie Howe, man, taking his time away from management very seriously, and he just comes back as a very new manager who just has this incredible blueprint that he's managed to impart on this Newcastle team. I'm excited to watch them play again. I was really nervous about this match. For me, I see Newcastle as an opponent to beat. If you would have, and we talked about this before the match. For me, if you would have beaten Newcastle, that would have been like a major marker. Because I think
Certainly.
more than any other team right now, they are, of course, next to Manchester City, really the team to beat in the league right now.
They've
Um,
conceded the least amount of goals in across the league, 11, and that's the best defensive record in the league. Speaks volumes for itself, speaks volumes about why they sit where they sit right now on the table. I really feel Newcastle could have had a goal in the dying moments of the first half. Probably should have had one, except for poor finishing and not connecting at the right time. But I realized that Newcastle just settled for a draw as soon as the second half started. Like, maybe in the first half, I could give them some amount of credit to say, okay, they were willing to play for points. But it just seemed that they were really, really, really rooting for a draw and had a nine-man defensive low block setup. And to add to that, they had all of these players clutching their ankles, their chin, their face on the slightest of contacts.
That's in many ways a compliment to Arsenal as well, right? Coming away to Emirates, I wouldn't blame them for having that sort of game plan, right? I wouldn't blame most teams at this point to have that type of a game plan, and they executed it pretty well. They kept us for the most part to half chances. Any real opportunity we had was honestly, in my opinion, within those first 6 minutes. So let us actually talk about that Arsenal performance and talk about what Arsenal could have done to really break down this Newcastle. Because I feel like we threw everything but the kitchen sink at them, and they just refused to concede.
The first 15 minutes is where ideally we should have scored. That would have built an exciting game, but I think we lost a little bit of tempo after that. And then as we edged closer to halftime, we began losing our composure. The ref started giving out yellow cards for incidents that I have no understanding about. Okay, if somebody pulling a t-shirt is a yellow card, then there were other offenses that were far worse but didn't get punished. And I'm not saying that the referee was biased, but all I'm saying is that we need some more consistency in officiating. This is the bane of the Premier League right now, inconsistent officiating. Certain calls were very questionable. The last minute injury time handball call, which didn't even get reviewed by VAR. Now, that's something I really want to question because there are other instances that have happened across the league, and there are certain instances that are far fewer in severity, but were still given as penalties or fouls, while this wasn't even reviewed. So, what is the threshold to something being reviewed, or where is the consistency? Where is it?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, especially towards the end. I mean, I always don't like using that as almost like a crutch. Like Arsenal should have scored. They shouldn't have had to rely
Nevertheless,
on that sort of a handball sort of situation. And Arsenal were to a point, especially towards the end, really trying to buy their own fouls. There was another completely baseless handball claim right before that as well. But I think that was the kind of game that it ended up being, where Arsenal, like you said, were really frustrated in that game because they did everything. The attack was incredible. I mean, I cannot point my finger at any one player and say that they had a bad
totally,
game today, right?
totally.
Yeah, even in Ketia, I feel like he could have had a little bit better decision making in some situations. But I don't think that's. I don't necessarily think that if Jesus were in that situation, he would have made a better call. Honestly, I think that's more of like, okay, we needed Odegaard in that place, and he would have probably picked out the right pass. So, not to say that Nketiah, Jesus would have done any better in that place.
It also points out one more thing. When you look at the bench, when you looked at the bench today, it did not really have someone you would want to bring in to probably change the dynamics of the game from an attacking perspective. Sure, we had defensive cover, but we really did not have anyone to bolster our attack or think of even having a super sub. We did not have that. And I think that is a call for the management and the ownership or the executive leadership group, whatever you want to call them, to make a decision on signings right now. Because if this is a genuine push at the title, if there is a genuine attempt at the title, which it definitely seems to be, the board could do better by investing at the right time rather than pausing for the summer and then talking about ifs and buts, which is always the case.
Oh, we'll probably do like a separate video talking about that anyway. But they are locked in conversation, for Mudrik at this point, who I feel like that's the kind of game changer that you're hoping for,
Totally.
to come off the bench and really make an impact. But again, it was still a really positive performance for me. Arsenal were by far the dominant team. I wouldn't necessarily say better team simply because Newcastle did what they were set out to do. They
That's
defended, and
true.
that is really what they wanted to do. So they did a great job at that. But it was good to know that at no point were Arsenal really under fire. It was always a draw or an Arsenal win, which as a gunner, as a gooner as well, you want to be happy about. Coming out of this fixture, and just hope, I mean, Manchester City versus Chelsea really struggling for form. Maybe they pull something off and kind of even out this result and still keep us in a nice position come the end of this match day. But yeah, any final thoughts on this
This,
match, on this result?
I'm just worried about other teams using similar tactics when they visit the Emirates because, hey, Newcastle did set out a blueprint, and if any other manager was watching this game, then they've probably got at least one game plan that they can try at the Emirates.
Yeah.
And at least that can yield 1 point, if not three. And that should ring alarm bells for Arsenal, where there should be questioning about how they figure out a deep block, because teams are going to do that. Certain teams that do not really have the free flowing football style or a fluid attacking sense will probably do this to grab a point at the Emirates. So Mikel Arteta has his work cut out right now.
Yeah, especially as Arsenal continue to change their image from, a team that is genuinely considered up amongst the likes of Liverpool and Manchester City. That's going to be more and more of a problem this season. Yeah, thank you so much for joining. Please let us know what you guys thought about this result. Please let us know what you think about Newcastle and their form this season, and whether they are actually good enough to finish in the top four. And as always, please like, share, subscribe. Goes a long, long way. And we will see you guys next time. Bye.